Hello, friends. If you weren't able to make it to our Sunday gathering, then I'm glad that you're here and with us in this way. It was a hot weekend this last weekend. The story of Genesis begins with a world that lacks nothing. Humans lack nothing. Work is beautiful, it's creative. Relationships are joyful. Love is pure. Rest is actually restful. There's nothing weird about vulnerability and nakedness. There's nothing to hide. All of life is face to face with God. Everything is good. And then as we keep reading, it's like, wow, humanity really starts to unravel. Creation starts to unravel. Humans believe that there's this thing that they lack, and so they try and take it, and then they're blaming one another and experiencing shame and hiding, and then they're isolated from God and from one another. Thorns, conflict, pain, anger, violence, murder, vengeance, slavery, rape, oppression, separation, deceit, theft, sugar-coated lies. Like, in some ways you could say, oh, that's the story of Genesis. And it's like this tiny little snowball gets rolling and it just avalanche. And generation after generation, as you read the story, they recycle these things that their parents did, and now they're doing them. And this thing is just going out of control. Have you ever lived in that moment where you realize, I just did something destructive? I replayed a destructive pattern or cycle from my own family of origin or from my own past. I just did something that I don't like it when other people do it, but I just did it. Well, that's where our story begins today. This is part 4 of our First Families series, walking through the book of Genesis. So this is the final part of this series. And if you want to follow along, we're looking at Genesis 35 through 50, and we're overlapping with our story last week. So if you missed our story last week about Jacob and Esau, we're picking up there. So today, our story is the story of Joseph. Joseph and his 10 brothers were there when Uncle Esau came over the hill with 400 men. And some of the brothers were teenagers. Joseph was just a little toddler. The youngest brother, Benjamin, wasn't born yet. They watched their father, Jacob, go into a panic. He's limping, he's scrambling, he's trying to get them to the back of the caravan with their mom. Joseph saw his father then limping towards the front, and he's bowing to Uncle Esau over and over. And then they see Uncle Esau's running at Dad, and at what they're hugging, they're embracing, and now they're crying, and they hear them talking. They hear Uncle Esau talking about Dad coming home, and they're like, "Oh, maybe we'll actually get to meet our cousins." And it sounds like they're going to have this family meetup in just a few days. And then they watch Uncle Esau with his 400 men take off, and they then watch their dad, Jacob, turn the entire caravan and go in the opposite direction. They witness their own dad not trusting his brother, not reconciling. He doesn't want to share life with his brother, Uncle Esau. So that's the beginning. Joseph and his 11 brothers, they all knew that their dad, Jacob, had never been the favorite. Grandpa Isaac did not favor his son Jacob. He favored Esau. And so you would think that Jacob wouldn't play favorites. You know, if you grow up in a household where your dad played favorites or your mom played favorites, it's like I'm not going to do that. But that's exactly what Jacob did with his kids. You know, we tend to recycle some of these patterns. And so Jacob had a favorite wife, Jacob had a favorite son, and Joseph was the favorite son, and everyone knew it. For one, by the time he was 17, he was sporting a chic coat that no one else had, multicolored coat. And it was like this uh, sign to the brothers all day long, I'm the favorite, guys. And Joseph was dad's spy. He, Jacob would send him out to the fields to check on the brothers who were tending the flocks, and then Joseph would come home and tattle, uh, say, "Dad, they're loafing off. Dad, they're doing something you said not to do." And so the brothers did not have a single kind word for Joseph. They were jealous of him. They hated him. I mean, how could they enjoy him? And 17-year-old Joseph really wasn't humble either. He started having these dreams about ruling and reigning over his family, over the sun, the moon, the stars. And rather than just keeping some of these things to himself, like keep the dream under your hat, buddy, he paraded all of these dreams in front of his entire family and he enraged his brothers. And so, of course, the brothers wanted to be rid of him. And one day they saw an opportunity. They're out grazing the flocks and they see Joseph on his way. He's going to come check on them. And they say, "Here comes that dreamer." And one of them says, "You know what? Let's kill him. Let's just kill him. We'll throw him in one of these cisterns. We'll say that an animal devoured him and see what comes of his dreams then." It's the Cain option all over again, out for blood. Reuben, the oldest brother, tried to divert the rest of the crew. He says, guys, let's not take his life. Don't shed any blood. So he said, let's throw him in a dry well. We'll let the wilderness do the job. And of course, Reuben is secretly planning to come on back later and rescue him. Well, the brothers went for it. So when Joseph shows up, they're grabbing him, they're tearing that coat off of him. And certainly they're enjoying the violence in all of this. They throw him down in that cistern and the empty hole, and they sit down. They're going to have some lunch. They're sitting there eating, and they look up and they see a caravan coming their way over the horizon. And the people in these caravan are literally their second cousins. They are the Ishmaelites, their own second cousins. They are the grandsons of their great grandpa Abraham. So here these guys come and they say, what are we going to gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites here, and then we won't have to lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother. He's our own flesh and blood. It's a ridiculous way to recognize it. It's the age-old question, am I my brother's keeper? Well, they're recognizing, yeah, he is our brother. And so instead of the Cain option, it's like, okay, we'll go with the Abraham option, separation. And so brutally, painfully, sell him away into slavery for 20 pieces of silver. They keep the coat and they tear it to shreds. They douse it in goat blood. They bring it back to Dad, bring it back to Jacob. They say, "Dad, we found this. Does this belong to your son? Is this your son's robe?" And Jacob, who once conned his own dad with his brother's coat and with a goat, a slaughtered goat, now he's conned with the coat and the goat. And he takes the bait. He's just beside himself. Right there, it's like Joseph is dead to the family. So he's taken down to Egypt. He's sold to an Egyptian, Potiphar. We're told that God is with Joseph. He quickly gains Potiphar's trust. He's put in charge of the entire household. He's handsome. He's a well-built young man. He's in the prime of his life. He can't be more than 18 at maybe a few years older if there's some time going on, but he's right there at this point in the story. And it's not long before Potiphar's wife develops a hankering for Joseph, and she says, "Come to bed with me." And day after day, Joseph is refusing. No, I'm not going to do that. And one day, she just grabs him. Come to bed with me. And Joseph pulls away. He runs away. He runs right out of his coat. It's like coat number 2, you lost. And Potiphar's wife, she's left with this coat in her hand, and now she quickly changes her tune. She accuses Joseph. He was trying to come on to me, and I screamed, and he ran away. And here's my proof. I still have his cloak, his coat. And Potiphar is just like burning with anger, throws Joseph into prison. Dark, locked away, forgotten. I mean, what kind of chances do you have now? Hour after hour, day after day. I wonder how many times did Joseph replay his life, analyze the story of his life, every conversation, every word spoken, every emotion, every choice. How can he escape his past when it's right there staring him in his face and it's all he has? And how does bitterness and hatred not start to just eat him alive? How did he not fantasize about a delicious moment one day when he would exact perfect revenge on everyone who had ruined his life? Well, we're only given this one simple phrase. It's Genesis 39:21. It says, God showed Joseph hesed, loving kindness. Somehow, as Joseph was in that prison, it's like he began to see love. He gains the warden's trust. The warden puts Joseph in charge of the prisoners and trusts him so much that he's not even paying attention to what Joseph is doing. And it came to pass one day that 2 of the servants of Pharaoh were thrown into the prison. And so Joseph gets to know them. And one night they both have these disturbing dreams, and they have no way to understand them. And here's Joseph, who remembers having his own strange dreams as a teenager. He says to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. And so they tell him. And Joseph responds by telling these 2 guys, you've got the cupbearer and the baker. He tells the cupbearer of Pharaoh, you're going to be restored very soon. But he tells the baker, you're going to be brutally impaled and beheaded. Well, his interpretations come true. 3 days later, the cupbearer is restored, and the other guy is impaled and beheaded. And before that cupbearer is restored, Joseph says, please, please, will you remember me? Don't forget me. Well, he forgets him. And so, I imagine those first few days, is he coming? Is someone coming for me? Months pass, years pass, hopes dashed. How does Joseph not sit there and just seethe with hatred for life, for the world, for his brothers, for everything? How does he imagine his brothers every night as he goes to bed? Does he see them as still happy to be rid of him? Does he see them as ruthless villains? Does he think, oh, they probably forgot about me entirely? Are they opponents to one day be conquered? How does he see them? The Bible doesn't tell us when this shift happened, but I want to tell you about this shift because it does tell us that it did happen. We're told God showed Joseph loving kindness. Joseph begins to see loving kindness of God. And the shift is that somehow Joseph began to see how angry his brothers must be, not only with him, but with themselves for the decision that they made to sell him. He somehow begins to see their pain and their grief and their distress that they must be carrying. And that's going to be revealed later in the story, but I think it's possible Joseph began to see this while he's in prison. The love of God helped Joseph to connect with the pain of his oppressors, his brothers. Well, one night, Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, has a disturbing dream. And Pharaoh wants to understand, what is this dream all about? What's the interpretation? And none of Pharaoh's wise men or magicians can make heads or tails of it. But Pharaoh's cupbearer remembers that guy back in prison who helped him. And he tells him the story. And so Pharaoh calls for Joseph. And after hearing about this dream, Joseph says to Pharaoh, he says, God has shown Pharaoh what he's about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. And the famine is going to ravage the land. It's going to be severe. And then Joseph adds his own little sales pitch. The skills he's built as a manager, his time in Potiphar's house and the prison. He says, Pharaoh should look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt, and then appoint commissioners over the land. Take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during those 7 years of abundance and collect all the food from the good years and store up the grain to be held in reserve for all those years of famine. Well, Pharaoh, that gets his wheels really turning, and he deliberates and talks with all of his officials. And then he says to Joseph, actually, you're the guy. I want you to be in charge of my palace. And I want everyone to submit to you. You're going to run this show, and only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. I mean, talk about a rags to riches story. So Joseph becomes the ruler of the entire land in a day, second only to Pharaoh. Those years of abundance pass, years and years, and Joseph he's storing up grain in every city, and there's so much he stops keeping track of it. But then that famine hits, and it starts to spread throughout the land, and it's hitting everyone, not just people in Egypt. And people start flooding in from all over because they need food and they need it bad. And so Joseph starts selling grain. Now the famine hits Canaan as well, where Jacob and Joseph's brothers live. And Jacob hears the news. Hey, there's grain down in Egypt. And so he sends his 10 oldest sons to go buy grain. So the brothers arrive in Egypt and they bow down before Joseph. And of course, Joseph recognizes them immediately from and he's got this thing playing in the back of his mind, the dream from years ago. My brothers are going to bow down to me. It's like it's unfolding. His brothers don't recognize him because now he looks the part of an Egyptian. He looks like an Egyptian ruler, and he speaks the language. He's only speaking to them through an interpreter. It's amazing how scars from wounds years and years and years ago can suddenly feel like a fresh wound when you re-encounter the person who actually wounded you. It's like something happened a long, long, long time ago, and now suddenly you're face to face with them, and you're processing all of those emotions over again right now. I look at what Joseph did. See, years and years ago, he was the one who was spying on his brothers. He was the one tattling to his dad, and they were the ones who threw him basically into prison. and they were the ones who took away Dad's favorite. And now Joseph flips that. He does the exact same thing. He accuses them of being spies. It's I'm not the spy, you're the spy. And then he has the most violent of the brothers, Simeon, bound and thrown into prison. You want to do violence to me, I'll do violence to you. And then he demands, you guys have to give me Dad's favorite. He used to be Dad's favorite, and of course he was taken away, so you guys have to give me Dad's favorite. He asked for Benjamin. That's Dad's new favorite. And of course, the brothers are trying to process all of this, and they're arguing and talking, and Joseph can understand everything they're saying. He speaks the language. He's got a front row seat to how they're processing. We're being punished because of what we did to our brother. We're going to have to give him an account for his blood. I told you not to sin against him, and they're going back and forth. And Joseph, his emotions are all over the place. He cannot control himself, and he's having to turn away, and he's weeping. I could just see this, the flood of emotions, the flood of thoughts, like, I want to kill them, or maybe I send them away, let them starve, let them rot in prison, make them pay. And I see somewhere in there still that light. God has shown him loving kindness. Well, he lets them go back to Dad. 9 of them. He's got the most violent brother in prison. So 9 of them go back to Dad. And Dad's beside himself when he hears, I'm going to have to send my favorite son to the ruler of Egypt. He can't bear the thought. And so he holds off returning to Egypt as long as possible. But the famine is too great. They got to have the food. And so then Jacob, Dad, does what Jacob does. He treats Joseph the same way he treated Uncle Esau, which is, let's just appease him. We'll butter him up. We'll give him some gifts. That'll smooth it over. And so Jacob says, put some of the best products of the land in your bags and take them down to the man as a gift. Maybe a little balm, a little honey, some spices, some myrrh, some pistachio nuts, some almonds. It's like, are you serious? We're giving gift bags to the richest man in the world right now? And of course, you have to send along the youngest brother, Benjamin, because that's what Joseph has demanded. And so there go the brothers with Benjamin. They're headed back down to Egypt. And so as they enter Egypt, this time Joseph has the brothers brought to his house for a meal. They have no idea who he is. And there they are, they're presenting the gifts that Dad suggested. They're bowing down before him again. And Joseph asks them about their dad. And he's struggling to keep his act together as he's asking his emotions. He keeps having to leave the room because his emotions are just bubbling up. And then he designs a test for the brothers. It's like he wants to see if they've changed at all, or are they the same people who sold him into slavery. And so he says, well, go on your way. But he frames that youngest brother, Benjamin, as a thief. And he puts a silver cup into his sack. It's like he's saying, you guys didn't care about me at all. You sold me into slavery. Are you going to treat the next favorite of Dad, Benjamin, in the same way? Like if he's framed as a thief, will you just be like, well, let him go? And so he frames him, then he arrests them. He has them brought back to the house. Benjamin's arrested for stealing. And the brothers are just beside themselves. They're like, what are we going to tell Dad? Joseph sees they do care. They didn't care about me, but they do care. They've changed somehow. And so they're like going back and forth with Joseph. Is there another way we can solve this? Judah is like, I'll take his place. Take me. And They start describing how much this is going to break their dad's heart. And Joseph has at least enough of a glimpse. Something about my brothers has changed, and he can't take it anymore. He breaks down, sobbing. And all of a sudden, this, you think about it from the brother's perspective, this situation where it looks like it could not get any worse. And he's sobbing, and they're trying to make sense of it. And he's saying, I'm Joseph. I'm your brother. I'm the one you sold into slavery. Is dad still alive? And their world is all out of whack. And they are speechless. They cannot even answer him. Trying to get a hold of, wait, what? And and what is he going to do to us? For they come from this long line of, within their family, it's like the cycles of blame and anger, separation, murder, lies, trickery, imprisonment, slavery, all these cycles that just do this. It's like now it's bound to come back on us. People like to use the word karma, or what goes around comes around. That this is the moment, that perfect, brilliant, delicious revenge moment that everyone craves, when Joseph can channel all of the pain that he ever experienced and turn it into this soul crushing blow on his brothers, and they're petrified. Now, Joseph is definitely in touch with his pain, but he's not only in touch with his pain. Joseph reverses that cycle of destruction right here in this moment, because his next move, his brothers are speechless because I mean, they're thinking he's about to smash us, and instead he addresses their pain. He's the first human in the Bible to ever address the pain of his oppressors. His next thing he says, don't be distressed. Don't be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. He addresses the pain, the distress of his oppressors, and he throws his arms around his brothers, and he starts weeping. Now, once the brothers find their voices, they begin to talk with Joseph. Imagine how much fear there is. This guy, their brother, has all of the power. How can they not? How can they do anything but say, "We're so sorry. I am so sorry." Uh, there's no more talk that we're given of what was done. Instead, the brothers are talking about going home, getting dad, getting the family, and moving to Egypt, where Joseph is saying, the very best of Egypt is going to be yours. And how can the brothers even believe what is happening? As they begin their journey home, how can they even, like, they stop and pinch themselves? Is this real? Is this real? Is this possible? And they get home and they have quite a story to tell their dad. On the one hand, it's the very best news. On the other hand, it's the very worst news. Uh, Dad, we took your favorite son and sold him away. At the age of 120, Jacob, dad, makes the journey to Egypt, and he is reunited with his son Joseph, the son that he thought he lost. And when Joseph sees his father Jacob, he just cannot stop crying. It's like all that pain comes pouring out of him, longing for home and family and love. And it's a beautiful story. The family lives together in Egypt, and Joseph provides the brothers, the family, with places to live, jobs that suit their skills, and they live together beautifully for 17 years, until the time of dad, Jacob's death, draws near. And when he dies, there's it's this massive ordeal. There are, there are deathbed blessings. Then there's this throng of people that make their way back to Canaan because they're going to go bury dad. Um, and then there's this period of mourning. But After all of it, there's this lingering question in the background, and it is a really dark shadow. And it is, will the cycle of destruction and dysfunction continue? You know, we've for 17 years we've lived in peace, but now that Dad is gone, remember what Esau did? He didn't want to kill his brother Jacob until Dad died. It's like, are we just going to recycle that? Now that Dad is gone, is Joseph going to take sweet revenge on the brothers for what they did 40 years ago, selling them into slavery? And so they say to themselves, what if Joseph has held a grudge? What if he hates us? What if he is going to pay us back for what we did wrong? And so there's this shadow of their sins and this fear of what Joseph is going to do, and it's been haunting them all these years. And so they send word to Joseph. They say, Dad left these instructions before he died. This is what you're supposed to say to Joseph. This is what they say. They said, Dad said, I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now, they say, will you please forgive the sins of us? We are the slaves of the God of your father. They're putting themselves as low as they can. The brothers are so afraid of this spinning cycle of blame and vengeance and anger and violence. And what's it going to take to stop this avalanche? Get it going in the opposite direction. There's only one person who can break the cycle. That's Joseph, the victim, the oppressed, the one who actually got sold into slavery in the first place. And so the message reaches Joseph. There's a lot of things he could do with that message, but what he does is cry. It touches him. He doesn't question, did Dad really say that? What are your motives? Why are you making this up? Uh, he's not angry with them. Instead, he sees their fear and their suffering and their sorrow, and they are asking for forgiveness. And look how long they've been carrying this. And he just starts to cry. He's come full circle to one of his earliest memories. So remember where we started? He remembers his own dad, Jacob, coming right up to that point of reconciliation with his brother and failing, not doing it. He says, "Yep, I'm going to come and share life with you," and then he goes in the opposite direction. And now his brothers are saying, "Will you please forgive us? We'll be your slaves. Please." Is he going to repeat the cycle? Well, here's how he responds. He says, "Guys, do not be afraid. Don't be afraid. I'm not in the place of God." He says, "You intended to harm me," like recognizing you did that. But he says, God intended this for good to accomplish what's now being done. The saving of many lives. He sees the good in what has happened. He says, do not be afraid. I'm going to provide for you, and I'm going to provide for your children. And so that cycle of blame and shame that for generations had taught the one who was the oppressor, the sinner, to say, I'm going to have to buy my way out of this. And the person I wronged is going to pay me back. Uh, after you drop your brother in an empty cistern and then sell him to slavers and force him to grow up away from his family, and then he rots in prison for years, like, how do you pay for that much damage? How do you give years back to someone and innocence back and undo suffering and injustice and starvation and abandonment? It doesn't matter how much you grovel or, I'll be your slave. Like, how do you know if you've ever fully paid it back and made things right? How do you not live under that constant shadow, ill at ease, in fear and in guilt? There's only one person who can break the cycle. And so Joseph takes that initiative, and it's the oppressed person offering care to the oppressor. It's you sold me into slavery, and I'm going to provide for your children. See how that works? Centuries later, Jesus says this same thing this way. He says, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. He says, if someone wants to sue you, take your shirt. They want to take your shirt. He says, give them your coat. Or if they want to force you to go 1 mile, go with them too. He says, give to the one who asks. Don't turn away from the one who wants to borrow. The Apostle Paul says, bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. So if your enemy is hungry, feed him. Or if your enemy is thirsty, give him something to drink. It's this the oppressed person offering care to the oppressor. And so Joseph offers this to his brothers, and not only are his words generous, but his tone is kind. And for the first time in their life, all that fear, what my sins might cost me, and this shadow of guilt, what I've done, it starts to fade. It starts to melt away. And it's the first time, this is the very end of the whole book of Genesis, they find comfort. Comfort in forgiveness. It's the first story of forgiveness in the entire Bible. You remember that Cain question that we started with as things unraveled? And it's, am I my brother's keeper? And Joseph finally says, yes, I am my brother's keeper. So we're left with just a couple questions in our own lives. When I suffer, when I am wronged, am I waiting for people to give me gifts? Am I waiting for them to make it up to me? Become my slave, grovel in the dirt, crawl on their belly? Because people certainly try that. We are your slaves. Please forgive us. So am I doing that? Or am I taking the initiative to name not just my pain, but their pain, and then offering kindness and care and blessings to my oppressors? That is a tremendously hard question, but that is the first story of forgiveness. And it is the breaking of the cycle of blame and shame and vengeance. Am I my brother's keeper? We say, yeah, that's ridiculous. I'm not good at that at all. Where do I find the juice? Where do I find the spark for that kind of radical love? I look back at Joseph's experience in prison when he was shown, God showed him loving kindness. And I see that as the juice. That is the spark. The resurrected Jesus, first thing he does is he breathes on his disciples. And it's not just go be fruitful and multiply, it's go multiply forgiveness. It's if you forgive anyone, they're forgiven. Anyone can do this. You guys can do this. And it's through our connection with the loving kindness of God. So that's the end of the book of Genesis. The oppressed blessing the oppressor, offering gifts, naming them as family, as brothers, which it's interesting is exactly how the very end of the Bible, the last book, Revelation, ends as well. It's Jesus standing as the lamb slain, this innocent victim, the one that humans have killed, sufferer, and Jesus is blessing his oppressors and offering gifts. And the very last words of the Bible actually mirror the end of Genesis, which is the grace, the loving kindness, there it is, the gifts of the Lord Jesus be with all. Amen. Very last words of the Bible. Love you, friends.